Thank you for coming. My name is Todd Hammer. If you were at my last talk, you will see there's probably about 2 or 3 slides that will be similar. This talk is going to be a little different. I want to talk to you guys about training speed in the weight room, something that I think is very important. Obviously, speed kills. Speed wins games, and we're going to touch on that real quick. I know a couple of you guys were in the last talk, but tell you who I am, why you're listening to me. Again, my name is Todd Hammer. I've been doing strength conditioning now for 19 years. I'm currently working at George Washington University, and I got a call asking if I would come speak at this, and my answer was, are you sure you want a guy who works at a school that doesn't have football? Like, we had football until the 1960s, and then we dropped football. Like, are you sure this is a good idea? And they said, yeah, you're good. You know, actually, the gentleman who vouched for me, Doug Smith at Juniata College, says you're good, and if Doug says you're good, you're good. So I was like, all right, thank you. But I've worked, of my 19 years, most of them I have dealt with football at one way or one form or another. I actually started in 1999. I was very lucky. I worked for Buddy Morris at the University of Pittsburgh. Buddy Morris, if you don't know him, is the dude. He's the guy. He's now with the Arizona Cardinals. Buddy Morris first introduced me to things like Westside Barbell, great t-shirt over there. Elite FTS, who I've been working for Dave Tate and Elite FTS for about 8 years. My wife worked for them for about 12 years as well. He introduced me to a lot of things I had no clue about. And the great part about a guy like Buddy is he came from a track background. And to me, when you can understand speed the way he did and tie it together with the weight room, it really changes things, and it changes how you look at what you're doing in the weight room. Let me see if this thing, and no. I found a remote and it doesn't work. So first off, thank you for being here. Obviously, I have to thank all the people that put me in a position, starting with Buddy Morris at Pitt. You guys may appreciate this. I was with Buddy in 1999. From there, I did my undergrad at Penn State, and I had 6 credits left, so I had to go up for a summer. And I went to my advisor and I said, hey, I want to be a strength coach, but I have 6 credits left, and 3 are this nursing course, and then can I just go be an intern in the weight room for the other 3? Because I want to be a strength coach. And I only have 6 credits, and they let me do it. So I went from working with Buddy at Pitt to JT at Penn State. And you couldn't find 2 more opposite dudes, to the point that I remember Buddy said to me something along the lines of, don't quote me, but something like, I can't wait to play Penn State this year because I'm going to fight JT at halftime at the 50-yard line. And I think he may have actually tried, because those 2 guys couldn't be more opposites in their approach and how they do things. After Penn State, I went and worked at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill for about a year and a half. Did my graduate work at Virginia Commonwealth, where I was a GA. Then went to the Citadel for a season. From there, I went to Marist College, where I was the director for 2 years. Then I went to George Mason University for 3 years. Then over to Robert Morris for almost 12 years. And then we got a new football coach. And I will tell all of you this, you're all football coaches. I'm not going to swear, but F football coaches. They got me fired. We got a new football coach, and I got fired the next day. Basically, is the long story short. And I don't mean F football coaches, but obviously new coach comes in quite often. Guess who leaves? The strength coach. So I was fired from Robert Morris. I have often said, and please take this if you're coaching, remember this. I've often said to my staff members, it's very important to have career security, not job security. Career security means when you get fired, because you'll get another job. Job security means you're not getting fired at your current job. And I was lucky enough that I had done enough right things to have career security. And I would tell you guys this, some of you guys may work at high schools, D3s, JUCOs, and whatever. I was this close to turning down 3 Division I offers to go to a D3. Because I thought it was going to be a better life. I truly thought I could live my life and have a good job. So those of you who work at, I think often people think, you look at Alabama and Scott Cochran, or you look at whoever, Chris Doyle at Iowa as a strength coach, and oh, that's the answer. Listen, I don't want Chris Doyle's job. I respect the hell out of Chris Doyle. Scott Cochran's a human. But I don't want what they do. I have no desire to go to that level. And I once interviewed for an NFL job, for an assistant with the Falcons. I was in my last year that I spent at George Mason. I got a call from a friend of mine and said, would you like to interview in the NFL? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think that's my goal. And he told me what the pay is. And I go, that's my goal. Yes, it is. And I interviewed with a very well-known strength coach who became famous because he tripped a guy when he was with the Jets, if you remember that. And then he went and got in a fight with Snoop Dogg, or was it Snoop Dogg or whoever he got in a fight with out at UCLA. And I interviewed with him. I think I interviewed on a Wednesday or Thursday, and he was fired on Monday. So it reminded me of why I don't want to go to the NFL. Because what if he had hired me on Friday? And I started driving to Atlanta to go to work and be a strength coach with the Falcons. And I just found out my boss just got fired. So that means I probably got fired too. So in this industry, there are great jobs at the high school level, NAIA, Division III, Division II, and Division I. I will always say that you will go as far as your boss is willing to take you, whoever that boss is, whether it be your AD, the president, the school board, whatever it is at the institution you're at, you're only going to go as far as they're willing to take you. My biggest mistake in my professional career, and I don't even know if it's a mistake because I'm happy where I'm at right now, is that I didn't leave Robert Morris sooner. And I say that because I knew my AD wasn't taking me anywhere. I knew I wasn't going anywhere because of that person. And I stayed at that job, and that was a mistake. I had opportunities to leave, and I chose to stay, mainly because my wife had a good job, we liked where we lived, life was happy, but I knew the job wasn't right. So the biggest mistake I made is just staying because I thought everything else was good, where I honestly probably had to shake things up. So in coaching, when you think it's time to leave, you have to have some hard conversations. And for those of you who are married, thank your wife and say, dear God, I don't know how you put up with me because this profession is stupid. So that's my son, Tenzing, by the way. Tenzing is named after the first Sherpa to summit Mount Everest. I'm Tenzing Norgay, and I wanted my son named after someone who actually had done something. Now, the point of this talk and what we're going to talk about is speed training in the room. And what I mean by that is we have limited resources. We have limited space. It's winter. There's snow outside. We don't have a field. How are we going to get our athletes faster? How are we going to get our guys faster when all we have is this room? We don't have much. I have 3 weight rooms right now. 2 weight rooms are about 2,000 square feet, and they're basically just racks and dumbbells. My third weight room is 10,000 square feet, half of it's turf, and the other half's basically 14 racks. It's absurd. I spend about 2 hours a week in that big weight room. It's also 3 miles from where I do most of my work. So it's pretty difficult to get out there. It's pretty difficult for me to have groups out there. It's a beautiful facility. But how are you going to make your athletes faster? I will tell you this, the number one thing you can do is make them stronger. And I said this in my last talk, so for those of you regurgitating information, I apologize. Remember this, your athlete will get faster and jump higher until they can squat 2 to 2.25 times their body weight. Very simple math. Take their body weight, multiply it by 2. I will sometimes even go as high as 2.5. But if you say you're 200 pounds and you squat 400 pounds, pretty good. You're probably still going to get faster by squatting more. Once you get above that threshold, strength is not necessarily going to make you faster and jump higher. It might, but not necessarily. The other activity I would put in there, and I stole this from Joe DeFranco 20 years ago, I think Joe's a genius, is pull-ups. Because if you take your bell curve of athletes who are good at pull-ups on your team, you take your bell curve of fast athletes, put them together, I guarantee you're going to see a correlation. It ain't going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty similar. So how are we going to speed train them? We don't have, we need to get them faster. First off, we're going to lift them. And we're going to start with all our lifts, big to small. This is not rocket science. We're going to do Olympic lifts, and we're going to do our big lifts, our squats, our deadlifts. Now, some people say, we don't do Olympic lifts. That's fine. Then just do your big lifts first. Olympic lifts, like I said, they're not all we need. As far as your actual programming, you could do conjugate. You could do 5-3-1. You could do APRE, concurrent. Charlie finishes high-low. I honestly don't care, and I don't think it matters. I really don't think it matters. And the reason I say I don't think it matters is because Scott Cochran, I kind of had a joke at his expense earlier. No one laughed at it when I said, I love this guy, and Scott's a human. But Scott wins a national championship almost every year at Alabama. Thank God Clemson beats him, so I don't have to hear about Alabama. His programming is as basic as it comes. When you look at what Alabama does, it's nothing special. There's nothing fancy about Alabama. The guys work hard, they're very athletic, and they're a good team in the weight room. So these are all good programs, but what's your goal? You get hired and fired based on wins and losses, right? Like, graduate your kids pretty much in wins and losses, and you'll be all right. So you could be doing Charlie Francis high-low, and we're worried about these things, and guess what? We suck at football, or we're not a good team. So none of that's going to matter. So the question I always ask is, like, what are the similarities between conjugate, between 5-3-1, between an APRE, concurrent training, a high-low method, whatever it is? What are the similarities? The similarities are, and this was in my last presentation, this right here, the force velocity curve. If you haven't seen this, this is life right here. This is sport, and it's basically pretty simple. You have maximal strength on one end, and you have speed on the other end. Now, I love Westside Barbell. I think Louis Simmons is a genius. I think he changed the way we train athletes. That being said, I've been lucky enough to train at Westside maybe 10 times, and every single time Louis says to me, you don't do those stupid cleans with your teams. I go, oh, absolutely not, Louis. I do cleans. But I'm not going to argue with Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell over cleans. And then he says, you sumo deadlift every one of your athletes, right? I go, absolutely, Louis. I don't, but I'm not going to argue because it's not worth my art. I'm going to pick and choose my battles. But what I like about Westside Barbell is that it basically looks at the force velocity curve and says, how do we move the curve this way to make our athletes better? And you know what it does? It does maximal work. It does maximal effort work. Work that's moving at about 0.3 meters per second squared. It does strength speed work. It does speed strength work. It doesn't really do speed work, but they're also power lifters, so they don't need direct speed work. But basically, you can numerically go down this line and say maximal strength happens at 0.3 meters per second squared. If you don't know what 0.3 meters per second squared is, I will show some videos, but all you have to do is Google Ed Cohn's deadlift. Watch Ed Cohn do his 901. Was it 901? You'd right know. Somewhere around there, 901. Ed Cohn deadlift. That's about 0.3. You as a coach go, that's how fast the bar moves at 0.3? Okay, I know that. If you want to know what somewhere in the strength, speed, power is, Google, Westside Barbell box squat day. Watch how fast that bar moves. That's probably around 0.7, 0.8 meters per second squared. That's what you're looking for. If you want to get down to the speed, strength, or even the power area there, Google Pyrrhus Demas clean. See how fast Demas's bar moves when he does a clean. That's about what you're looking for. Eyeball it. It's not rocket science here, as long as you're doing stuff in all that area. And then the speed stuff comes down to plyometric work and what you're doing on the field. To me, the speed stuff, yes, you're doing box squats box jumps in the weight room and hurdle jumps in the weight room and some plyometric work, but a lot of that's going to be done on the practice field in and of itself. Because if I'm a defense back, I'm backpedaling, I'm cutting back, moving forward, what's happening? I'm being explosive. It's naturally a plyometric movement. So you're actually, as a sport coach, filling that speed side by yourself pretty nicely. Now, I want to get them faster. There are methods to increase muscular tension. You'll notice my model here is one of my best friends and a former training partner of mine, Casey Williams. Casey squatted 815 raw, I think, has deadlifted 815 raw and benched 605, I believe. So he's a very strong person. He also played defense. He plays a safety at Bucknell back in the day. But I used him for my examples today. This first video we're going to see right here, he's doing an explosive squat. It's actually a little slower than it should be. I texted him yesterday and said, send me some videos. I want to use you in this. And he sent me these videos. I thought this one was a little slow, and you'll see on the last rep where it really starts to slow down. But behind him is Donnie Thompson. If you don't know Donnie Thompson, he's first man to total 3,000, meaning his bench, squat, and deadlift equal 3,000. But here's Casey with somewhere between, I don't know, probably about 505. I'm guessing doing his explosive work. But this is about like pop right there. If it's moving much slower than that, we got a problem. Like if we're trying to be explosive right here, pop. Okay, and like I said, this one's a little slower than I want it to be, and you can see in that third one it's starting to break a little bit, but we're looking for him to move the bar fast. That to me was probably a little too slow. But you know what? The intent of moving the bar fast, you see his face right there? He clearly worked hard. That's the next goal of it. That's what we are looking for. We're looking for an athlete to come down fast, move fast. As far as you're all football coaches, right? So you're saying, well, yeah, my job is to stare at squat technique all day and understand it. I'll say one more thing about this video. If you watch when he squats, how can you tell if the squat's pretty good? Are the feet flat on the ground? Are they getting as low as you want them to go? I will sit there and debate all day long with you on both sides of super low squats and high squats, because every human is different. Every human is different. Here's the reality. Me, you, and you all have different femur lengths. The head of the femur comes in at a different angle. And here's the other fact. If I am lighter skinned, meaning generally a white guy, my femur is going to be shorter than you. Why? Adaptation over millennia of what happened to your skin over years. Your family lineage was more in the sun. Mine was in Ireland eating potatoes. My torso grew longer, right? Your family was in somewhere warm, and your torso grew shorter and your legs grew longer. So generally, if you take your white guy on team, your black guy on team, and again, it's generalization, say point to the top of your hip, your black guy's gonna be here, your white guy's gonna be here. So are their squats gonna be different? Yeah, absolutely, their squats are gonna be different. Now again, that's a general, you're gonna have that one white dude that's like, damn, you got a long leg for a white guy. That's gonna happen, but it's a generalization. And again, you can generally tell by the pigmentation. If you take an Italian or Greek, they're generally gonna have a little longer femur. Why? If they're darker skinned, the adaptation that occurred over the millennium was a little longer femur. There's a great book called Sapiens. And if you've ever looked at the book, you read that? Yeah, great book, man, great book. And it talks just about that. Like, we are all just adaptations. And when you look at a human, you can figure out how they adapted. The next way, and now I talked about that 0.3 meters per second squared. Again, I'm using my man Casey here. This is a maximal effort lift. This is about what 0.3 meters per second squared looks like. This is a reverse band squat, somewhere in the ballpark of 900 pounds. I'm not exactly sure what his weight is, but I do want you to notice a couple things. Again, look at his feet when you're looking at his squat. You notice, man, those feet stay buried flat to the ground. There's not a lot of movement in the feet. So you're trying to teach a squat, or the feet staying buried flat to the ground. And I know there are some things like, well, my athletes aren't using knee wraps. That's unimportant. The important is the strain for, there you go, boom. And that was probably, if I had to guess, about 0.4, probably a little faster. The interesting thing about him as a lifter is that he doesn't know how to grind. He's a very athletic dude. He can't grind a lift. He'll accelerate that bar, he'll add a quarter or miss, because he's an explosive lifter. So you see him going with whatever amount of plates is on there. It's probably 945 if I had to guess, but then you have the reverse band, maybe pulling 100 off at the top, so 845. The thing with a lifter like him is he is naturally explosive, so he's gonna need to get more on that 0.3 side. So he needs to learn to grind, because what's happening is, back that force velocity curve, his speed side's pretty good, his strength side lags. And I know that's hard to believe when I'm saying a guy who's squatting almost 900 pounds, but he's just so naturally explosive. That's why in college at Bucknell, he squatted 585 at safety. Like you don't want to run into that safety. Obviously, his ability to get fast, you know, his strength is probably already maxed out. As a power lifter, we need to get him to grind. As an athlete, you know what we need to get him to do? Just be in shape, because he's already strong enough. The last video I'm going to show will be of repetition. And again, steal my man Casey here as my model. Here he's just using, you know, some different bars. I think it's 5 or 6 reps here. I think he's around 600 on these. But the whole point of repetition work is just what it says. Get the repetition. It's not a ton of acceleration, but you're getting our muscles to work, getting our muscles to do repetitions. So sit, stand up. And then you notice with him, even on the repetition work, things are a little different. He actually brought his stance in. He changed his stance for his rep work, because what's the goal of rep work? To get blood flow in the muscle, not to move the most amount of weight. If you look at Mark Dugdale, great bodybuilder, some other people similar to that, they will say weight doesn't matter on your repetition work. The whole point is to fill the muscle with blood. So I don't care, I think it was at 5 or whatever there. We're just doing repetitions. We're trying to get the muscle to break down so we can rebuild the muscle. It's funny, he texted me one day and said, Hammer, would you ever do a slow concentric lift? And I said, absolutely. And he was like, that's dumb, why? I explained that. And I said, well, we do slow eccentric lifts, right? And he said, yes. I said, what's the point of a slow eccentric lift? Without getting too scientific, actin and myosin, all you're trying to do is rip those heads off, get the satellite cells to come in and rebuild the muscle tissue. So as we do a slow eccentric, we're just ripping the tissue apart. We're trying to tear that tissue apart so it can rebuild stronger, right? We're trying to create damage to muscle tissue. So if I create a shit ton of, try not to swear. I had 2 beers beforehand, sorry. 2 beers means 1 swear, right? You're trying to just build a ton, just a ton of muscle damage. I get down here, I want to keep that tension on the muscle and build more damage, right? So where would slow concentric work go? Early off season with football. So what are we going to do? We're going to do 30 seconds down, 30 seconds up. Do 1 rep. It's the most miserable thing you've ever done. One of my mentors and a good friend, Harry Selko, once said, have you ever done a 2-minute pull-up? I said, what the hell is a 2-minute pull-up? He said, minute up, minute down. I was like, no, I've never, no one, no. What's wrong with you? He said, you need to be able to do that. So I went back that week. I was at Rob Morris at the time, and I started at 30 seconds. I did 30 up, 30 down. Then I went to 40. Then I went to 50. And I got my 60 up, 60 down. It was miserable. It was not fun. It was hard. It was difficult. But I guarantee there was a ton of tissue damage. Tissue damage means tissue rebuilding. That's what we're looking for in repetition work. I don't care what you do in repetition work. I care that you damage tissue. I care that you fatigue the body. And this example, like I said, he's doing 600 for whatever it was, 5. You notice it was a different, he approached it differently. He actually, something that, he's in a monolift. For those of you who've never used a monolift, it's basically for power lifters. They're lazy, so we don't have to walk the barbell out. We just stand there and the hooks come out. But you notice on that one, he walked out. Why did he walk out? He wanted to set a different mindset to it. But I will say one thing when we're talking about making the athlete more explosive, that you'll see in all 3 of his lifts is the focus he has to the lift. And I think that's one of the hardest things to teach football players. I think football players are harder than any other sport to teach this lift or to teach that focus. And I think the reason is because football is such a more punch you in the face sport that it's hard to get them to say this 1 rep is all that matters in your life. And they want to crank it till it burns and it hurts, right? Because that's mentally what we do. Like when I grew up playing Pop Warner football, and you guys remember you had the piece of wood right here and your dad was holding the dummy and you had to do this crap. And everyone did it. The quarterback did it. The punter did it. Like more is the mantra of football. And I think quite often it's hard to actually show them that same approach to the barbell, that 1 rep matters. 1 moment matters, and that's all that matters. And you notice when he did his dynamic work and his max work, the setup, the mindset was a little different than when he got that repetition work. Now, I'm going to tell you guys this. Lifts don't matter. I don't know why that blue thing's there, and since I'm not, I apologize. As long as you're filling the force velocity curve, I don't care what lifts you use. If you are comfortable teaching Olympic-style weightlifting, use Olympic-style weightlifting. I think Olympic-style weightlifting can be a great asset to you as a coach. Now, let me add a caveat to that. I never required a lineman to catch his Olympic lifts in season. Why? Did you play a line? You're a big fella. Like, how do your wrists and shoulders and elbows feel in season when you're hitting people? Probably hurt. So if I'm taking a guy and trying to get him to do this in season, it's probably going to hurt. Now, I say I never required it. I had some guys that come in like, Hammer, I want to catch. I feel good. I'm like, okay, we will. That's good. Let's go ahead and catch. But I wouldn't require it because the point is that I'm trying to get explosive. I'm trying to fill that force velocity curve with an explosive movement. I'm trying to get them to snap the bar, be fast, be violent, right? So yeah, the catch is good. Yes, I think that's an important thing. But you know what? I'm really looking for that boom, pop, be explosive. So if you feel comfortable teaching the Olympic lift and you're a football coach, but you say, hey, I know these lifts, then teach them, use them. If you don't, that's fine. Don't teach them, don't use them. There are other ways to be explosive. I had a great powerlifter that was one of my assistants about 5 years ago. And I think his best squat was like 770. And he said to me, I'm not using Olympic lifts with any of my teams. And I said, no, you're required to. And he said, what do you mean? I don't need to. I said, you don't need to, but you're required to. One team, pick a team, and you're doing Olympic lifts. Like, that, Hammer, that's crap. And I was like, no, I'm requiring you for 2 reasons. One, because you might get hired somewhere else, and they might require it. So I need you to have this skill. Like, I need you to have this tool in your toolbox, right? It'd be like if you said we run a 3-4, and you're like, I never understood a 4-3. Get a new job, guess what? They're running a 4-3. You're not getting that job because you don't even know what a 4-3 is. 3 linebackers doesn't make sense. You know, I'm a Steelers fan. 3-4 is awesome. We all know that. But so I made him institute Olympic weightlifting in one team. And the other reason why is I said to him, why don't you need Olympic lifts? And he said, the stereotypical West Side mantra, which you know, is we can be explosive in any lift. Yes, you're absolutely right, you can. But when you look at that force velocity curve I was showing you, if you watch someone squat and be explosive and try to be fast, it will never be as fast as a great Olympic weightlifter. Olympic weightlifters are inherently faster in their movements than powerlifters. And the other issue is this: you can be explosive in your traditional squat, deadlift, bench, even an overhead press. But the thing is, you can always do those lifts and not be explosive. You can't do a clean or snatch and not be explosive. You have no choice. Why? Because if you've ever seen someone do an unexplosive snatch, it's called a muscle snatch. And you as a coach will look and be like, that's not right. That's not a snatch. A snatch is a snap. So I do think they have their place, and I think they're going to aid in making your athletes faster if used properly. I think quite often it becomes this, one's right and one's wrong, one's the answer, one's not the answer, and that's not true. So just fill the force velocity curve. That's why I say the lifts themselves don't matter. What matters is you're filling that force velocity curve. You must do some ground-based. It could be kettlebells. It could be Olympic lifts. It could be squats. You know, the old jammers. Like, jammers still have their place. I'm not like in love with the jammer, but I mean, it definitely, there's some place for jammer. You look at what Elite FTS and what Sornex have done with, now you can attach them right to your racks. You know, they just make arms so that you have jammers built right into your racks. That's ground-based lifting. And I talked about this in my last talk. Do more pulling than pushing. Do not be a zealot of you have to do 2 pulls for every push when you bring a kid in the weight room. And here's why. Because you have to do more than 2. And the reason I say that is every one of your football players knows his max bench. None of your football players knows his max lat pull down or row. So we percent our bench, we don't percent our row, so the relative intensity is not the same. So if I do 5 sets of 5 bench, 5 sets of 10 seated row, I guarantee it's not the same stimulus. So it's not really a 2-to-1 because the relative intensity of the row was whatever the hell weight was on the stack. The relative intensity of the bench was 75% because that's what we set as our percent. We percent those lifts, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, the cleans. We don't percent rows. And Buddy Morris said this to me: variety is the spice of life. It's important for you as a coach that whatever you're using, add variety to it. I remember about 8 years ago, I was at a conference and Buddy was speaking, and I was struggling with just one specific football player. I said, Buddy, I can't figure this out. He said, do you know French contrast? I'm like, no. And this was about 8 years ago. I'm like, what's French contrast? He goes, it works, Hammer. Do French contrast. I'm like, well, what's French contrast? He's like, here's some information. And I went home and Googled it. And I went through all Google. There was one article I could find about French contrast. If you don't know what French contrast is, Cal Dietz has really brought it to the forefront. Cal Dietz, strength coach in Minnesota. And basically, real simple is you're going to do something heavy, something explosive, something heavy, something explosive. So it could be I'm going to squat and then go over to a box jump, do a weighted jump, and then do a broad jump. That's a simple way to look at French contrast. That way you're hitting those explosive movements for the athlete, and you're also getting them stronger. And the other thing is, let's say I'm a high school coach. I don't have a huge facility. I don't have a lot of room to do things. Well, now you're pairing things together, so you're keeping people moving throughout the room. So I'm going to say you're going to hit 5 squats at 65%, and then you're going to walk over to the box. You're going to hit 3 box jumps, and you're going to walk over to dumbbells. I'll actually just take empty trap bars, hold the trap bar, hit 5 jumps with a trap bar, or hold 30-pound dumbbells, whatever, and then go over here and hit 2 or 3 broad jumps. The reason I'll throw the broad jumps at the end is because one of the cool parts of broad jumps is you're kind of taking gravity away a little bit. So you figure if you were to jump vertically, gravity's pushing down 9.81 meters per second squared, right? So when I land, the amortization phase, the time on the ground is going to be longer. If I broad jump, I'm actually jumping this way, so I'm not fighting gravity directly, right? I mean, I'm still obviously fighting gravity, but it's a little different. So broad jumping, I'm going to have a little quicker amortization phase. So I'm saving that most explosive movement for the end. So that's one little variation, and I'll be totally honest, I stole that variation 100% from Pat Davidson. One thing you'll see a lot of now, who Cal Dietz has popularized, I'm not in love with it, is the band-assisted jumps. I don't know if you guys have seen those, where you hang a band off a rack and you hold on, you jump and you jump. I think it's kind of dumb, to be honest with you. I've tried them, and I'm like, people would just like doing it because they fly up in the air. I don't really think you get a huge training effect from that, because most athletes, as I watch them do it, they're not faster off the ground because they want to get higher into the air. So it becomes this like, hey, look, I'm floating thing. And it's like, no, that's not the goal of this. The goal is speed off the ground, shorter amortization phase, shorter time on the ground. So I would prefer throwing a double or triple broad jump with no reset, and I'll tell them, pop, pop, pop. I don't want wasted time. I want pop, pop, pop. I want quick off the ground. So figure out the variety, mix it up. Now here's the other secret. This is the biggest secret in the history of speed training. Run steps. I don't care how you do it. Stan Efferding has said this. Stan Efferding, if you don't know, is the world's strongest bodybuilder. He was a bodybuilder, had a lot of success, became a powerlifter in his second meet, set a bunch of world records. He's just a bad dude. These were called the Indian Trail steps. If you can follow the path, like you got all those steps, I don't know, maybe it looks like about 30, probably about another 40, whatever. It keeps going. It ends up in that top right-hand corner, right under that blue bar is. If you can see, it's hard to see, right? These were the Indian Trail steps. If you've ever been to Pittsburgh, this is Mount Washington in Pittsburgh. This is where the Fort Pitt Tunnel is, actually. Fort Pitt Tunnel would sit right about here today. I want you to think about something for a second. That back in the day, Mount Washington, where all those fancy houses are, look over the city of Pittsburgh, that was where all the coal mine or the steel workers lived, and they would walk down all these steps with their lunch, and at the end of the day, they'd walk up them. You know, we complain we don't get a good parking spot. That's what they used to do. One, it reminds me that we are lazy, man. We are so apathetic. But two, here's the science behind running steps and why steps are important. It's not as great of an eccentric load. So when you step, just like a box jump. Why? Because I'm stepping up onto something, I don't have as much gravity coming back down. So if I just run, I come here, I have all the force of me coming down, gravity plus me coming down, right? If I step up onto something, what's happening? I'm getting more of an eccentric load coming back up. So actually, you'll get less sore from running steps because there's less of an eccentric load. An eccentric load is where the muscle breaks down. So I want to get my team into shape. Jim Wendler said it best. You want to get in shape? Run steps. Right? I know this is not sexy, this is not bands, this is not speed ladders, this is not dot drills. That will get your athlete faster, more explosive, and increase relative strength. Yeah, good.
So how would you program that?
That's a great question.
Just like a general.
I personally love steps the day after you train your legs because it takes away the eccentric load. I'm going to steal from Louis Simmons again. Louis Simmons said, what do you do the day after you train legs? You push the prowler and you drag the sled. Why? No eccentric load, get a bunch of blood flow, let the muscle recover, and let the athlete recover. Now, we're talking about January, February. Biggest pet peeve I have with football is spring conditioning. Dumbest thing it's dumb, I'm sorry. It pisses me off. I did it for 15 years of my life. Wake up at 6 a.m., rah, run, blah, 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 all this crap. Why? Like, the football season's in September. What are we doing? We need to be getting strong right now. If it was me, if I had a perfect world, now, listen, if you're the head coach, yes, sir, we're going to run at 6 a.m. But if you said to me, what do you really want to do? We're going to squat Monday. We're going to run some steps and bench on Tuesday and overhead press, that kind of stuff. Wednesday, we might drag some light sleds, throw some med balls. Thursday, come back. It's going to look more like that. That's how we're going to draw our week out. This is going to be programmed day after or the end, I'd even say, of a leg session where it's not a lot of eccentric load, it's not a lot of muscle damage, but I guarantee it's a huge metabolic demand, and I guarantee it helps their relative strength. And if you're dealing with a high school athlete, they're just weak. I had a associate AD at Robert Morris. His son was a standout football and basketball player. He's actually on the team now at Penn. And I remember he said this to me like 4 years ago. He said, what should I work on, speed or strength? I said, strength. He said, but he needs to be fast, Hammer. I said, but here's the thing. If all of us wanted to get conditioned, give me 1 month, and we all will run laps around here really hard and fast, and we're all going to be shredded up, and our wives are going to be happy because we look good, right? If we all want to be strong, give me 4 years, and inch by inch, battle by battle, we're going to win in the weight room. Strength takes time and is hard. Strength makes you better. And I am in no way putting down or saying like speed's not important or speed doesn't matter. What I am saying is that strength controls speed in many ways. And if you're not putting strength first, you're forfeiting a little bit of their speed. Now, I have, on a rare occasion, had that athlete who walked in squatted 500 as a freshman. And honestly, you're like, dude, you don't need to be much stronger. I told this story in the last group. I had a senior defensive end a few years back during camp, benched 475 during camp. He said, Hammer, I want 500. I was like, no, Steve. He's like, Hammer, 500, I got it. I was like, I believe you probably can bench 5, but let me ask you this, what difference will it make? He's like, I want to hit 5. And I was like, again, what are we going to get if you bench 5? Like, what are we going to gain? How are we going to be a better football team? And how are you going to be a better player? Because you can't rip, you can't swim, you can't spin, but you can bench 5. You're never going to lose on bench press. Bench press will never hold Steve back. And his squat was like 550, so he slightly out squatted his bench. But I was like, I appreciate that you put a lot of work in your bench. I appreciate you want to bench 5. You're not doing it today. You're not doing it right here. You're not doing it right now. Because that 1% chance of injury is not worth it. Because I remember I had a football player that went home for the summer. I had a suspicion that he was a steroid user. And I'll never forget lifting him off at 365. This is a kid who hit 325 before he left. Went home, 365, and it looked like this, and I'm not kidding. Okay, 385. At this point, I wasn't letting any assistant spots. I was spotting because, one, I was kind of convinced the kid had used steroids, and then you have concerns about soft tissue injuries. 385. A little slower, but still pretty easy. Let's put 4 wheels on. I'm like, I'm not saying no, man. That was easy. He comes down, and I remember watching the pec tear and watching it just ball up into his shoulder. I remember watching, watching the two, like I was standing over him just saying, boop, and you could just see the muscle rip. That was our starting linebacker who transferred in, who the year before, because he transferred in from a 1A school, had 11 tackles against Alabama. Do you know what my conversation with the head coach went like? It wasn't like, I was a little concerned about my job. Like, coach, our best player's out for the year because of a bench press. Now, I then said, and I think we should probably look into, is he on steroids? But that isn't something you don't want to deal with as a coach, is so why take that chance? I personally love 1-rep maxing our athletes. I think it's a great way to test them mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I mean, getting under, I still compete in powerlifting. My best bench is 475. I remember the first time I tried 475, it came down to my chest, and I swear to God, I saw Satan appear before me, and I was entering hell, and I thought I was going to die, and I got scared, and they took the bar, thank God. I came back next meet and got it. There's something about that fear that's really good for us as humans. I love that fear. I love that I was afraid, and I love that I came back and got it. And I'll tell you right now, my goal this summer is to get to 500. I want to get 500. If I get 500, I keep promising my wife, I'm 42, I'll hang it up. I'm done. I keep promising. Won't happen. But I think that's important. It has nothing to do with running steps, and I apologize for the tangent. This is a slide I put in every presentation. So again, if you were at my last one, here are 2 things I will say to every athlete when we come in. If you want to get faster, if you want to get stronger, if you can't be on time and work hard, it's not going to matter. Every job in the world you can't see because whatever that is in our way, but it requires these 2 things. I don't care what you do per se. Prowlers became very popular about 10 years ago, right? Everyone's seen a prowler and used a prowler. And then Dave Tate started making fun of the prowler flu, see who can puke. And then the smart strength coaches came in and said, that's dumb. We have to use them properly and scientifically. And then we started a debate amongst ourselves. Here's the reality. You may puke during a lift. I may puke during a lift, and that's totally fine. If the goal of a lift is to puke, you're probably not a great coach. If you puke because you're working really hard that day, that's pretty cool. Like, I'm okay with that. So as long as you're showing up and doing these 2 things on time, prepared to work hard, you're probably gonna have success as a coach, as an athlete. Like, be on time, work hard. I don't think that's rocket science. I don't think that's hard to figure out. As I said here, they'll put anyone in a position for success, and they, to me, are the most important things you're going to learn in college and in life. And a slide I didn't put in here that I put in my last one, and I think is important, it ties directly into this, is that last thing. You want to have success in high school, in college, in life, in whatever the hell you do, right? Understand why you're doing this. I truly believe most people that begin this coaching profession do it for the totally wrong reason, including myself. They do it because they love their sport. You should do it because you love to teach. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, we're math teachers, we're physics teachers. If you take all of us in here and put all our athletes together, how many are playing in the NFL? Okay, maybe a few. I have two. And I'm really proud of those guys. I think that's awesome. Okay, how many of them are going to retire off that money? Mine, 0. Of the 2 that are in, neither are going to retire off it. So, knowing that, what is truly our job? To prepare them for the NFL? Or just to kind of give them some life lessons and say, move on and do successful things? And here's what happens when you do that. And again, this has nothing to do with speed, but I think it's important in coaching. They donate back to you. They spend, and I'm not just talking financially, they spend their time with they come back and talk to your freshmen. They come back and give back to the program. Why? Because they care about who you are, because you know you cared about them. So whether you're running a step swim, whether you're doing 5-3-1, whether you're doing concurrent, conjugate, APRE, I don't think it matters. I really don't. And I will tell you right now, I rarely spend my time teaching A skip, B skip, and C skip to my athletes. We might do it a little. We do a little backward skip with open hip and all that stuff. But most of our athletes are really not that good that they have to worry about that. Do a little arm swings with them, get them stronger, and spend your time improving them, and you're going to have success with them, not just on the field, but off the field. So do these 2 things. Make sure they're on time. Make sure they work hard, and make sure you're consistent with them. Because I'll tell you right now, I've seen more coaches, and I've dealt with, and I'm not kidding, over 1,000 coaches from different sports. The coaches who are consistent with this have a chance. The coaches who are inconsistent with this might get lucky. If you've ever heard the name Fergus Conley, he's written a book, Game Changers. He also wrote a book, 59 Lessons. And we had a long talk, about a 2-hour talk last week on the phone. I was driving from Pittsburgh to DC. He called, and we just started talking. And we started talking about the difference between a transactional coach and a transformational coach. I think it was Joe Ehrman who first came up with those terms. And a transactional coach uses their athlete like chess pieces. How do I get that 1/10 of a second under 40? How do I take that chess piece and make it in a better position? A transformational coach does that, but they do that while transforming that chess piece by taking the person and saying, how do I make you better? How do I build you up? And that's the coach that's going to have success in the long run. And he said to me, he named a big-time coach who he had worked with who was an NFL head coach, a college head coach in the Big Ten, and said, that guy is not a transformational coach, and that's why he'll never have the success he could have. I've seen it for 10 years. He's transactional with his athletes. And he said, does he win? I said, yeah. He said, does he win? And I was like, yeah, he wins. And he goes, does he win big? And he was like, well, he wins. And he goes, that was holding him back. Last slide, this is my contact information. That's my cell, that's my email, Elite FTS. I write for. You can find a lot of my stuff on there, and you can definitely contact me through that as well. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, I would love to hear them. Hopefully that wasn't too much off on tangents from what you were expecting, because I tend to do that.